Mr. Womack.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I totally understand the tremendous pressure that your organization is under, given the last several years of issues that have already been articulated in this hearing and in other hearings. But I want to go back to some of your numbers for just a minute. To be clear, you say you had a record number of enforcement actions, and as I'm looking at the testimony, the number was 735, in an impressive list of different actions involving CEOs, CFOs, and senior corporate officers, broker-dealers, et cetera, et cetera. But of those 735, it is my understanding that a significant percentage of these actions are really follow-on administrative actions. And I realize they count in the numbers, but if I'm looking at the numbers correctly, between 2009 and 2011, the number of original cases is actually down. Now, am I reading these numbers wrong?
Well, a couple things. First of all, these are apples-to-apples comparisons. We count follow-on administrative proceedings both in the 2009 and the 2011 numbers. But I think the point that's been perhaps lost in some of the commentary that I've read, at least about this, is that administrative proceedings that are follow-on are absolutely critical to our ability to enforce the federal securities laws. It is only through that vehicle that we are able to bar people from continuing activity in the securities industry. So that if we want to bar somebody from acting as an investment advisor or as a broker-dealer or in really any other capacity, we have to use a follow-on administrative proceeding. Some of those are hotly contested. Some of them aren't. Some of them follow naturally from the civil proceeding. But they are an absolutely critical tool for us to utilize in ensuring that people who have violated the securities laws don't keep coming back over and over and over again.
I don't argue that point at all. But I'm going back to the numbers. On one hand, we're talking about 735 enforcement actions, but less than 500 of those are original actions, and there were more than 500 original actions in 2009. Now, the reason I make this point is because we're sitting here today looking at the better part of $250 million increase for an agency, and we're making the argument that this enforcement restructuring or this enforcement action by the SEC is demonstrating its enormous success, if you will, in what it's doing. Now, either the numbers are misleading or the actions that we're talking about are just much more complicated actions, and so I'm giving you an opportunity to help me through these.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I don't believe the numbers are misleading at all. I do believe that the actions are far more complex than they ever have been historically. If you look at the many financial crisis cases involved incredibly complex structured products and sales practices, and of course our disgorgement and penalty number is also very significant for this year, $2.8 billion, that I think helps to recognize or represent the complexity of the kinds of cases we're bringing. We have brought cases against firms for improper selling to school districts. We have brought cases for misleading investors in the sales of CDOs. We have brought cases for bid rigging in the municipal securities markets, extremely complex types of matters. Obviously, the entire web of insider trading cases that has involved an enormous amount of investigative resources to connect all of the people who were in a conspiracy, really, to insider trade. We've brought very complex Foreign Corrupt Practices Act cases. So I think the numbers don't give the full story, and we always try to say the numbers don't give the full story, that the complexity of the cases that we're bringing and the number of senior people that we're naming in cases are also important factors in showing the efficacy of the enforcement program.
The additional funding that you've had last year was, how do you break down that funding insofar as how much of it went into enforcement related activities?
In last year's numbers, we had an increase of 400 positions, 63 of which I believe went to enforcement to focus on risk assessment, litigation, building up our trial capabilities, excuse me, as we are, I believe, litigating more cases than we have historically. The largest number last year, or in this current fiscal year, went to Trading and Markets Division, which is responsible for all of the regulation and oversight of the securities markets and much of the Dodd-Frank implementation, the creation of the OTC derivatives regulatory regime, and then issues of market structure like high-frequency trading and co-location, dark pools, the response to the May 6th flash crash, and all of those efforts.
Can I assume that one of your roles there, or one of your functions, is to continually evaluate the structure and the investment that the federal government is making in the organization to ensure that the proper resources for the proper emerging issues are being effectively and appropriately allocated?
Absolutely. I view that as one of the most important parts of what I'm there to do, is to make sure that we are good stewards of the resources that we have, that we are acting smarter and faster than we ever have before. The last 3 years have required significant rebuilding of the infrastructure of the agency to support these major initiatives to reorganize our enforcement and our examination program and to build the technology to support them. But we are very much, I think, headed in the right direction.
I have one more question, Madam Chairwoman, if I may, and that is the relationship between the, and I call it an information technology platform, whatever you call it in your agency. What can you just briefly describe what your request, what you're attempting to do insofar as your automated platforms are designed to do, and how that may be able to save the agency money and at the same time reduce our continued dependence on more and more additional personnel?
Sure. We believe we can dramatically cut our O&M costs for a number of systems just by modernizing them and getting them off 10 and 15-year-old infrastructure, and that those savings for EDGAR and for SEC.gov could be as much as 45%. So those are just two very quick things. But I believe also that by eliminating the siloed structure of our technology and our data and allowing our staff to access one layer or a data warehouse without having to go in and out of multiple different systems to do their job could save us tremendously on staff efforts and increase productivity. Those are just a couple of examples.
Thank you for your answers. I yield back.
Thanks, Mr. Womack. I would like to ask that for us to have a separate meeting with your IT director, please, because I want to know exactly, I want to know how fast we could work together to get that IT system unsiloed, because I think, obviously, perhaps in the past, before, in between the times that you were there, if you had been able to put in the name Bernie Madoff, just for example, and had found any kind of filings that he and his company did in several different places, maybe we could have found something faster. But I would like to have a separate meeting so that we can discuss how much it would cost to get this up and running, totally modernize your system in the shortest amount of time possible.
And if I could just add to that, we'd be happy to actually demonstrate for you the new examination system called Trends that allows examiners to have access to all information about a particular registrant at their fingertips instead of having, again, to search multiple different databases, and to also talk about the TIPS complaints and referral system that we talked about a lot in this hearing last year, that the agency deployed last year, and we intend to spend some of our technology dollars to enhance and refine that system so that, again, TIPS that come in from disparate places into the agency come into one place and can be linked together so that Bernie Madoff's name would show all of the TIPS that might have come in about his conduct. Excuse me.
Right. Well, I'll look forward to doing that because I think it's absolutely critical, and we've been